Good morning, everybody. Remember I had mentioned that I wasn't going to be out today and you're going to be filling out these notes on your own. So you should have your notes packet in front of you. We left off, it says at the top, page 25. We had stopped with the question where we had reduced them and we found they're both 100th grams per calorie, 100th of a gram per calorie. And we said, hey, look, these are the same. And that's where we stopped. What we are supposed to be looking at next is setting two fractions equal. And in the moment two ratios are equal, they're said to form a proportion. Now, we've already been using proportions because I know you've seen them before, but it is supposed to be like the next thing on here. These proportions could have mixed rates, like we were doing with grams per calorie. You could have 1 man per 5 women, and then you could scale that up for the ratio of people in a room or whatever. But the order mattered. Remember how the miles per hour, we said you can't just suddenly flip that around and say it's the same? That's because they have to be in proportion. We just weren't using that terminology. So on page 26, we can still think of this as how we're scaling things. So this is going to be similar practice to what we were doing before. Your teacher assigned a 5-paragraph, 750-word paper early in the semester that took you 2.5 hours to write. The final paper of the semester must be 3,000 words long. How much time should you estimate it will take? Can you complete it in 1 day if you've procrastinated? I love the if. That's very generous of them to assume you weren't already. We're going to just kind of walk through these steps. The first thing is write a ratio that represents the number of words per hour. Remember, the per is just telling us, hey, words are going to be our numerator and we're going to represent that for each hour. And what it said is you wrote 750 words and it took you 2.5 hours. So we're going to write 750 words. I'm going to keep the labels on here so I can make sure that I know the order for the rate that we're writing. 750 words for 2.5 hours. That's all I'm writing here. Then it says to scale the ratio by a factor that makes both the numerator and the denominator whole numbers. Now, there's more than one way to do this. What I'm going to do, the reason that they're not whole numbers right now is that denominator has a decimal, and since it only is to the nearest, well, in terms of tenth, not even rounded to the nearest tenth, I'm going to multiply by 10 is what I'm trying to say. So that means if she maintains that writing rate, we can assume 7,500 words, and that should take her 25 hours. Not super useful because I need to scale it because I didn't want 750. I was trying to find 3,000. So my ultimate goal is to scale it to 3,000 words, which honestly we can do using what I have. We could figure out, well, what do I divide 7,500 by to get 3,000? You might be automatically thinking the answer. What also could have been helpful is if I had just multiplied by a number other than 10 in the first place. And I'm trying to think of how I want you to do this. I think I'm going to keep what I have. That way you don't have to erase and rewrite something. So I take it back. I am still going to multiply this by something. But if you're saying, I'm going to go off to the side, 7,500 times some number has to give me 3,000, you can find what that number is by just dividing by 7,500. And you're going to realize that that's just 2.5 times what it was. So the thing that I would be multiplying by is technically a division. So instead of scaling it up, I'm going to scale it down to 2.5 its size. So again, we figured that out. What do I divide this by to get 3,000? Well, I divide it by 2.5. So let's divide 25 also by that 2.5. And we can find it's going to take her 10 hours. So you can still do this by scaling if you are very cognizant of the order you write your fractions and sometimes do a lot of work to find that scale factor. And also to answer the ultimate question, it's supposed to take her 10 hours. You could also just solve a proportion for this and it's also correct. But sometimes I'm going to just ask that you confirm that something's in proportion. So what we're looking at on number 11 says nutrition guidelines suggest that we consume 25 grams of fiber for a 2,000 calorie diet, 30 grams of fiber for a 2,500 calorie diet. Is the suggested amount of fiber proportional to the number of calories? And is it almost proportional? So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with 25 grams of fiber for a 2,000 calorie diet. and I'm going to save you some time in putting it in your calculator, and I'm going to tell you that reduces to 1 gram of fiber for every 80 calories. If you do the same thing with the other one, 30 grams of fiber for every 2,500 calories, that does not reduce to the same exact thing. So is it exactly proportional? No. But then they ask, is it almost proportional? Because this is real life, and real life is rarely ever very nice, perfect, and neat. And if you divide 1 by 80, you get 0.0125. If you divide 3 by 250, you get 0.012. So is it almost? Yes, it is. Is it perfectly proportional? No. But we can think of this as essentially 1.2% is, I guess it, sorry, those labels are different. I should not call that a percent. But 0.12 grams for every 1 calorie. So now if I said, well, how many grams of fiber should be for a 3,000 calorie diet? We can use that same ratio to find this out. So which one am I going to use? I'm going to use the 3 out of 250. Just because it's fairly simple. I probably should have used the 1 out of 80, but it's too late now. No turning back. We're supposed to do this for a 3,000 calorie diet. And I want to know, well, okay, how many grams of fiber do you get? Because remember, grams of fiber was at the top and calories at the bottom. As long as you maintain the order, this can still be the same rules. Just be careful the moment you have rates that you don't flip it around, because it's not going to work if you do that. So we're going to get 9,250x. And when then you divide, you get 36 grams of fiber. So proportions, again, it's not really new. We've been working with this. We're going to skip both part C and part D and instead jump to the connect. In a recent year in the U.S., approximately 2.2 million adults were incarcerated. If the people of the U.S., population of the U.S. at the time was approximately 336 million, how many incarcerated adults were there per 100,000 people? So right now we know 2.2 million, and I'm just going to use that as the label. Those are the incarcerated, and that's per total population, 336 million. So that's the total. I don't want it in these units anymore. We're trying to scale it. Specifically, we're asked to scale it to not per 1 person, but per 100,000 people. So I need to figure out if this is like what I think of my new total. Let's say there's a town of 100,000 people total. How many people would I expect to be incarcerated? Well, it's a proportion. You can cross multiply and solve. What I want to point out, remember, anytime you have anything over itself, it's a unit of 1. You don't have to actually figure out what is 2.2 million with all the zeros in it. Just think of this as now 2.2 over 336. So I'm going to take 2.2 times 100,000. Let me make sure I get this right. 1, 2, 3. Pretty sure it's that. And 336 times x. And then I'm going to solve. And what I'm seeing is it's about 654.7. So it's about 665 people would be incarcerated if you had a town of 100,000. Now, your city does not have 100,000 people in it. The sign at the edge of town, I noticed when I came in, I think it said 1,600. That is per the last census. Google told me a different number. We're going to use the one that's on the sign, mostly because it's a nicer number. Now, I'm out of space, but I'm going to keep using the same 2.2 to 336 amount, and I'm going to just go up above because we're not using that for anything else. But remember, your population is not 100,000. We are assuming a population of 1,600 total people. So I want you to finish solving this. I want you to circle your answer, and that's part of what I'm going to check when I check to make sure that you did what you were asked and you followed through the guided notes and filled it out. Don't forget, there is also an assignment. We started this assignment in class yesterday. You're just continuing on with it. I believe I'm asking you to basically finish the whole assignment, but let me double check that. You're never going to do number 5, but everything else should be completed. So right now, go scribble out number 5, and then just make sure that the assignment that you were given yesterday is completed. If you can't find that assignment, the sub should have an extra paper that you could borrow. Come in with questions tomorrow.